Hi there. Welcome to the Deep End, December 12th, starting up week 15 in the NFL season 2023. Mike Shope, Adam Prattwurst, excited to be joined by Darren Armani, Fantasy Mojo tonight as FFPC leagues transition in the main event and the Fantasy Pros Championship to the so-called sprint. Lots of different strategy, lots of interesting information to know and process depending on where you stand in these things if you were lucky enough to make it. And Darren will help us figure all that out. Tonight, we'll talk about some trends and what we see coming up here in week 15. Mike and Adam with Darren Armani, thanks for watching and listening. This is the Deep End.
Well done, Mike. Well done, Darren. Oh, look at that. No, we don't like that. We want that. See, we're cutting off Mike's head when we do this, right? No.
I can move.
Adjust the seat.
Here we go.
Center.
Welcome to the show, Darren. Thanks for coming on. Always love having you on this time of year. Hopefully get you on before maybe the playoff challenge as well. That's like one of my favorite competitions in all of fantasy sports. But I'm excited to hear all the sweet content you have for us.
Yeah, it's a bit of a lull, and then now it all kicks in again with the championship round, and then the playoff challenge. And then, I mean, if you think about it, we'll be drafting in 5 weeks for 2024 because the draft starts before the Super Bowl finishes.
Be still my heart.
Who's we?
That's right.
I know last year at this time I was very much, let's just wait, but I didn't wait. And it's been an interesting year. Also, by the way, Adam, Darren mentioned on Twitter we'd be talking about memories of Canton. Canton and Las Vegas, we were together in both cities. The only time I saw Darren either time was when he drove Nick Costantino and me back to the hotel so we could get a best ball draft in. We hardly had any time together. In Vegas, I didn't see you at all.
Yeah, the problem with Vegas is all the people are sort of relying on me to provide ADP, which after that Thursday night game literally shifts, like it turns on its head. And so being East Coast time, I usually have that stuff out like 7 a.m. East Coast time on that Friday morning. So I don't really have any time to sleep. So I was just like, I don't know, like it's got to be at like 4 a.m. Vegas time. So I didn't know what day it was.
So are you saying you're locked away in your hotel room working while you're in Vegas? Is that what you're saying?
If you walk down the ballroom hall and you like peek around the corner, you'll see me on my laptop like crawled in a corner like running stuff because the drafts from the Saturday or the Friday morning draft, they're like the first big set of that's the ADP, right, based upon the Thursday night games. So then people want that for the afternoon and the evening. So there's no time to chill out. Like you guys are having a pizza party over there with the ship chasing guys. And I mean, I don't know what was going on. I saw John Daigle for like 5 minutes at the pool tiki bar. And then it was just, then at the draft and it was go the whole time.
You've got all that to do. I go out there, I do my Buffalo show, what is it? Noon to 4, I guess, Pacific time. And then I'm in the bare knuckle on Thursday night. I got to figure out how we can go to Vegas like this for 3 or 4 days and have more fun, because it is fun. Drafting is great. Seeing everybody is great. You're in Vegas. It's a cool 109 degrees outside at 10 o'clock at night. The restaurants are great, but it's still, maybe this is just how I am. Like every time I'm on my way home from Las Vegas, I feel like I've missed out on something. So maybe next year it'll be different. This year, I've got a lot to figure out, guys, about this year. This is like sort of that tipping point, like Darren alluded to in terms of the schedule. And in FFPC, you go to the sprint if you made it. NFFC, FFWC, all of these. Underdog, of course, is also the same thing. Home leagues, you move into playoffs. I had a very interesting year where all year it's really felt like this. Fewer teams were good. In every format, fewer of my teams were good. Too many of my teams were dead by Halloween, if not earlier. But my good teams were very good. A couple of those have tapered off, and I got to figure out why. Like sometimes, I don't know, Darren, do you have a philosophy on it? Do you feel like there's necessarily a process failure when you run bad? And I'm not saying I'm in really bad shape, but better. I'd like to be doing better. Or is it sometimes just what happens?
Nah, I think just having done this a while, it seems every year things get more volatile. And like in years past, like you had a good team and like they were more likely to stay good teams. Now it's chaos and mayhem every week. Like they get blown up and you're just grinding to try and keep your head above water. And like, you've got a solid core, but you can't let up. Right. So you're just, it's exhausting. So now we have like 3 days, or at least we don't have to do waivers. Right. But now we have to like get the lineups right and get them set perfect for, these championship rounds here. So, but yeah, I think it's just more volatile every year. It's just, drafting a team and then like riding it to glory is like a thing of the past.
Well, listen, speak for yourself. I got some 3Ks and 5Ks, 3Ks and 5Ks that require my in here. But no, I completely agree. And Mike said it earlier in the season, like there's so like really early. There's like feels like there's more balls to juggle now than there ever was before. And like you said, Darren, like the days of like drafting a team and nurturing it and like really watching it grow, like whatever, are gone, because there's just the amount of players that you're rolling through. Like you fall in love with a player and then he's hurt, and then another guy. It's just chaos. You can't even really enjoy the ride, and then next thing you know, it's over.
And the game's evolved too. You don't have bell cow backs as much. Mm-hmm. The rules have changed. Like some guy like looks weird, like, oh, he's got to go into protocol. So that you just got additional volatility because of that stuff too. Like players disappear on a dime.
There are really a lot of reasons, aren't there? Like teams know enough in terms of running backs, at least, not to wear their guys out. The season is literally longer than it used to be. Everybody's bigger and faster. So, there's lots of examples where teams are going to play it slow. Maybe injuries like we've seen perhaps to Jonathan Taylor, just to think of one example. Devin Achane earlier in the year would have been played through in the past, but now we've got the depth. We're in a good position in the standings. More teams make the playoffs, which means less urgency in winning games. There's so many parts to it, and a more sophisticated league where they have a better handle than ever on player health and just workload, all these things. Everything is conspiring to make our jobs harder. And there's more good players.
Yeah. Fantasy players, you mean, right?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, there's so much good, like, there's paid content, obviously, which is, some of the best, but there's so much good free information out there. Twitter. I mean, there's so much good. Even Darren puts great stuff out on Twitter that he doesn't have to. And so, yeah, I mean, there's just so much you can learn and so much you can be guided by just by the free stuff out there, that there's just, and then with the leagues that we're in, guys, it's hard to describe to guys at home, guys at the Sizzler that Darren plays with. Like you get the best, like you think of like the top player in your home league who's usually pretty sharp, really good. Well, every player in these leagues that we play in is the top player from their home league, plus world champions and all that type of stuff. So only 4 teams make the playoffs in a lot of these leagues. So you really got to be at the top of your game and get a lot of luck.
Yep. It's a grind. It's exhausting, just like some of the leagues that wrapped up this week. I kind of measure by my success, not by like maybe like where I placed, but like who did I beat in that league? And like there's this team, there's Frying Pan Inc. is like alleged Larson and Petrie.
They're good. Yeah.
I mean, they were in a bunch of leagues, and Bitcoin seems to be in every league I'm in. Like every time I turn around, I'm playing against Bitcoin. So it's like, like you can't let up.
Yeah, it's funny how the years go by, you have your own rivals. The guy for me, who I don't know very well, I've met him in the bare knuckle a couple times, is Mongooses. I know you know who he is, Darren.
Yeah.
How about this last night? We were pretty close to 50-50 going in. I was a little bit of an underdog. So because of that, with Josh Allen, I sat Ayuk for Davis and thought that I was getting away with it last night when the Packers were driving at about 3 minutes left. And I had Dillon and Kraft up 10 with Jason Sanders in the other game against Mostert with 6 minutes left in the Miami game. And Miami's punting after a sack, 13-all. I'm almost home. Like I've got Green Bay driving. I've got the Miami kicker for a backup, and Mostert's had a quiet night, and they're kicking the ball away late in a tie. What's the worst that could happen? Overtime is maybe the worst that could happen for me in Miami. Actually, what did happen was worse. Still, I get a reprieve when Tennessee takes the lead and Miami gets the ball back, needing only to a field goal to win, and I have their kicker down 2. You know what happened?
I do. I didn't know what happened.
So whether it's bare knuckle or these things, I seem to always come up short against mongooses. He's my.
There you go. Your arch.
Belichick and Brady. I don't know what it is. Yeah, but I know he's good, and I know Darren. You know he's good too. You see his name a lot.
Yeah, he's always winning cash. He's a quiet guy. But
yeah, he's in the 5Ks and 10Ks and stuff. He's
all over.
He's good. Yep.
Congrats to him. He won that game against me with Jefferson. I can't whine about the Davis call. Was my bad call. He lost Jefferson in the middle of it. One more point or example to this point about sharper players. Darren, would you agree with this? I'm looking through your data today, and that's like the main event versus the Players Championship, which is what, about approximately 5 times more in entry fee. Notice, like, for one example, Ty Chandler is almost double the ownership in the main event to Bijan. That's one thing I was thinking about, but also just like the variance, it's the wrong example that I wanted right now, but the variance in percentage ownership from the main event to the FPC. Maybe you have more people who've given up in the FPC, but have still made it. You see, like, whether it's Chandler or Kraft is another one. Maybe it's Jake Browning, quintessentially, where in the main event, more wheels are turning. They're getting to guys for depth purposes, like maybe a week earlier than in the Fantasy Pros. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you've got a higher percentage of seasoned players, and then the other thing is, a lot of those seasoned players don't play in the the Fantasy Pros, or they've had to sort of fade it in terms of higher stakes, just because you only have so much bandwidth, right? So you might have Cocktails and Dreams or Hubbard, right? And those guys will attack waivers very similarly across all their teams. So it can really skew. Like if they decide that they want to pick up Chandler, they're going to do that like on 50 teams, right? And so that's going to kind of skew the player pool because it's already smaller, but they own such a higher percentage of teams in the overall, tournament there, compared to Fantasy Pros, which is gigantic, and no one player is like really skewing any data that way based upon what they decide to do.
I get it. So it's more like, it's less the just general concept of there being sharper players than it is a small number of sharper players who are dominating basically skewing the data because there are so many leagues.
Yep. That's my perception anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, no, I completely agree there. And a lot of it's what you're comfortable with, right? Like are you comfortable going into these weeks with 2 quarterbacks? Are you comfortable going in with 3? Like I have a Fantasy Pros team that made it through, had the bye, made it through and all that. And I opted to keep, a bunch of running backs. And here I am with Jake Browning and Justin Herbert. It's like, okay, well, please God, Jake Browning, don't die. And feel free to have a couple good games down the stretch. But it's like, you just look at this team and it's just like, oh man, like what could have been really, really good team. And now, you cross your finger. Like normally I'm a 3, like, and you look at some of the other rosters that I have. Normally I'm a 3 quarterback guy going into these things, not because, you never want to draft 3, even when you've got like a Josh Allen or a Mahomes, like you don't want to draft 3 because that's silly.
You want to draft 2
or even 2. But once it gets to this time of year when there's no waivers and all the money's on the line, last thing you want to do is fall asleep at night after a big week and know that, man, I don't have a quarterback unless you're a Beeb and you can get away with winning the whole thing without a kicker. Like that's about as close as you're going to get. You need a quarterback for sure.
And even with 2 or 3 now, like it feels very unsafe. Like you could lose them like 1 week. Yeah, 1 week comes in and they're gone. So there's not luck, but it's I don't know.
You could say luck. It's fine.
It could be.
There's an element of it.
Is this year? It's an outlier for quarterback injuries, isn't it? I mean, so many guys have.
One of the Twitter doctors posted, it's just perception, right? And then he listed like these are the 8 guys who have missed 3 games, but then he left out Kyler Murray, he left out Tannehill, he left out couple other guys who like they might not have been injured 3 games, but injuries sort of played into their downfall. Like they got Wally pipped. Like they got injured 1 game and then for like Levis, like he came in and then just kept the job. So it's injuries playing into it beyond like the guy's out. Like there's other factors. It's just volatility at the position, you know. In New England, like who knows what they're doing every week? It's an unstable situation.
Right.
So.
The Jets. Well, that was an injury, 4 plays into the season, but yeah, there's just been so much tumult at the quarterback position. It continues. Was Browning, by the way, before we get too far away from this, was he somebody we were supposed to think was different than all these other backups floating around, bouncing back and forth? I mean, Tim Boyle even. Did we miss it on who Browning is if we didn't make that move, or is that just how it goes? Good supporting cast, team still alive, good coaching. I don't know.
It doesn't seem like anybody preemptively picked him up. It was just, once he started playing, like they saw he's got the goods, or he's better than your typical backup.
Okay, that's why he's on all those teams, because it was after the Jacksonville game.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the ownership percentage in the tournaments, he's, I think, at the highest owned quarterback, because only the teams participating in the playoff, the league playoff, were able to do waivers.
We're able to add
they picked them up.
That makes sense.
I think the thing with Browning too is like we've just seen even this year, and even Anthony brings it up in the chat. We've just seen even good quarterbacks play so poorly this year that we're like, yeah, okay, Jake Browning. Like, am I going to waste my time with this guy who probably stinks? I mean, if Patrick Mahomes stinks this year, Jake Browning definitely stinks. So like, how can we justify that? You've just seen so much poor quarterback play. And then Browning even comes out and says, listen, I haven't played a lot, but I've played in big games, and I've played pretty well in my college career. So, it's just, you just don't know. And it's about the roster spots too, right there. And like, you don't want to go in with all the turnover at the running backs and receivers constantly. Like I need 6 running backs and 7 receivers. Like I just can't trust matchups. You're playing matchups. You need 2 kickers, so it's like you want to play the right matchups. It's just sometimes at the end of the day, there's just not enough roster spots to really justify carrying, 3 quarterbacks or picking up a Jake Browning.
Every team's different. And I ran the numbers again before we got together to look at the roster compositions of the teams in the main event. 75% of the teams in the championship round have 2 quarterbacks. There are 18 teams that went with just 1, and I think 4 of them are like Justin Herbert teams, so they're done. There's the bulk of teams at running back are going 5 or 6. So that's 70% of them. So there's a sweet spot at each position, but it depends.
Does that flex year to year, Darren? Like I was looking at last year's numbers as far as teams that got into the into the money rounds. I think it's like 6 running backs, 7 receivers. Like does that hold pretty steady year in and year out?
I think it shifts a little bit. Like it's definitely like the top number is definitely moves.
Okay.
Within running back and wide receiver for sure. But I'd have to go back and look. But
yeah.
But you mentioned quarterback this year. There's more. There's twice as many teams that went with 3 quarterbacks this year as did last. It's a smaller percentage. 20% of teams have 3 quarterbacks, but last year only 10% of them did. So that's kind of speaks to, fear or just the volatility of what's going on.
You might also have. I'm not sure this adds up or holds up, but a number of teams, maybe like the Dolphins or some others, Chicago, where you have 3 or even maybe more running backs, and you get to this point and you're like, okay, well, there's Mostert and there's HN, but do I really, what's the plus EV, Jeff Wilson versus a 3rd quarterback, or like a Roshan Johnson, somebody like that, where even if you did get an injury, which the odds aren't necessarily for, then you still can't really, it could be just the team environment too, but can't really expect to win starting the guy.
Yeah. Like what's his upside? What's the scenario where Roshan Johnson is like a league winner,
right?
Which is probably slim versus like making sure you don't get completely eliminated by going too thin at like quarterback. So again, it's a team to team thing. What's one thing I found interesting though on the quarterbacks, we were talking about Jake Browning was number 1. So, and I'll be on the GOAT district a little bit later, and some of this stuff I dug up for them. But Patrick Mahomes is the 21st most owned quarterback. Like, I can't believe he's that low. Like 21st. Like, if that guy like gets hot all of a sudden, he's going to be. I mean, that's pretty decent. Play to have on your team. 21st. That's crazy.
I noticed that too. Is it 50 teams total in the main event? Does this hold up that he's not really tied to anybody who's been successful? Kelsey is the obvious name for Mahomes, and I think he might be on 69 teams, tight end 14, if I counted right earlier. So you have that pairing, but it has not been prolific, and there's no one else. Sometimes I think you'll have, is it Tyreek Hill and Tua, where you have a receiver who's so dominant, he'll carry the quarterback through and you'll have those numbers. The Chiefs don't have anybody like that. So I did notice that too and thought that was interesting. Plus, he's a third-round pick, right? And so the 2v2 versus other guys versus even Tua or whoever you want from those middle rounds is not going to bode well for his advance rates.
Yeah, it's harder just to get them in a combination. But people went so far out of their way to get Kelsey Mahomes stacks, like they didn't even care like about the cost. So
it didn't pay off.
Very average advance rate.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm looking at the advance rates too. Like, in a down year for quarterbacks, people are like, oh, the quarterback, yes, some of the top ones are great, but they're not as great as they've been maybe last year or the year before. And there you have, I mean, obviously take Jake Browning out of it because like you said, he's on the teams because you were only allowed to pick him up in the playoff rounds. But Josh Allen's number 2. It's like, again, he was the QB1 for the most part or QB2. And here he is as the QB1 essentially ahead of Prescott and Hurts. And so, he kind of did pay off here for teams down who drafted him high.
Yeah, he's got a very similar outcome as last year. It's almost identical. Like he was the number 2 guy last year as well. But not like the 75% number last year of Kelsey Mahomes teams making the sprint was insane. That might have been like an all-time high. I've never seen anything like that before. So
one more point before we get to a break and then get into some different subjects. I heard you mentioned John Daigle earlier. And speaking of roster build for the sprint, I saw him make a point a few weeks back that this is, you want to have a backup everything, but this is a year where he thinks it was, if I remember right, reasonable to go in with one defense, sort of as a corollary to how many teams are in really bad shape at quarterback, easy to play against. So even teams that were not in the top half of the league rankings in defense became, I think you could live with just going, I have Indianapolis on teams for one, just sort of riding with them and not having a pivot, using that extra spot somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense in theory. I'd have to look. So 25% of teams went with one defense and 60% went with 2. I did also go with 1, but I have San Francisco, so I'm not like looking to play matchups. But yeah, that's a valuable roster spot to use somewhere else if you can get away with just 1 because, they're not going to get hurt.
Louis G and I are off to the sprint, and we had a league winner in the final this week. We had the Miami defense and the Colts and cut Miami for CEH just to have, one more running back option. Not that he's ever been good except for that first game of his career. I mean, has he ever had a second good game in his career? The first game opening night, you talking about Vegas, Darren, against Houston, that first game went to 101 the next morning. In this game, it was 11 for 38. Just, it's never happening, but we have to have him just in case every other running back on our team gets hurt. All right.
I don't think has he ever delivered for us like since then? He really hasn't. Like he was a hot pickup last week, but I was like, you can't really see him like hitting it out of the park. But he was the best thing available, so everybody took him.
Yeah. Another dilemma in this game. More with Darren Armani, Fantasy Mojo here on the deep end. Mike Shope and Adam Krautwurst. Thanks for watching and listening. Please like, subscribe, do all that at Deep End FF1. We'll have more after this timeout.
Hey, we're all starting new fantasy leagues all the time. And more often than not, where do we start our fantasy leagues at Player Profiler? On Sleeper. Because it's the best. You can imagine my excitement when I saw Sleeper rolled out. Sleeper picks, baby. And game stacking is the path to positive returns with these pick'em games. Find that sneaky shootout and set most of the players to go over their projection for that week. Or you find a game going to get dragged into the mud and take every member of the passing game for less than their projections that week. And if you Pick up to 8. That's how you 100x your payout on Sleeper. It's called the Hail Mary. So if you use promo code Underworld, you get a $100 instant deposit match. Check out Sleeper's terms and conditions for details. These Sleeper picks are live in over 25 states. Yeah, buddy.
Welcome back. I want to mention, again, you know who Darren is, of course, if you play high stakes, Fantasy Mojo. So much good information there. For those of you that don't know, subscription site, the Stack Explorer, all kinds of different trends and analysis throughout the season. Highly recommend it. I want to make sure I say all this and make sure with Darren that if I give other numbers on players here in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm not giving away the store.
Nah, I think a lot of this stuff is, I've put a lot of it out on Twitter already. So this is just good discussion stuff. But the details are, at the site in the Stack Explorers and whatnot.
And I want to just say too, because we probably obviously won't have you on maybe until then, but honestly, the most valuable part of your site, I really think, is the fantasy playoff, like the playoff challenge of FFPC, like that information. I think because it's such a unique contest and we only do it like once a year for the playoffs. Maybe you're not used to it or you're not comfortable with it. Like the historical data of what wins is a super, like, I don't even want to tout it because I don't want anyone using it, but like it's been super good for me. And I think people should definitely use it.
Yeah, I got all that stuff done and sitting in the can ready to unveil once we get to the sprint. So I see them already. People are signing up for the playoff challenge. So they didn't expand it at all this year. It's exact same payouts, exact same size. Actually, they did make one slight change about the payouts, and there's no Football Guys subscriptions this year. I think there's it's all cash. So
I think
other than that's the same thing.
So I think
Adam has numerous times won lifetime memberships, including at the poker tournament in Canton. He won a lifetime membership. Adam he's going to need to become a cat to cash in on all his Football Guys lifetime memberships. I'd love another one. I feel like you can't have too many. By the way, Underdog has had, of course, Underdog dominating so many things, with best ball and just constant contests. And there's been playoff challenge tournaments, I know already over there. So have you guys maybe because of that dabbled in it yet? Like, I think maybe one strategy this year, just to go off into the playoffs for a second, is the AFC, especially after Miami's loss to Tennessee, just doesn't look to have one team that people are going to lean into necessarily. I think you can go a lot of different ways, and we'll see if Buffalo is really an X factor in that.
Yeah, I haven't jumped into any of those teams yet. I'm still focused on regular season. As I get older, I'm less able to like shift paradigms and cross them over like that. It's like I got to get through one thing and then move on to the next. So there'll be plenty of that when we get there. So no, jump the gun.
Yeah, there'll be plenty. But the interesting thing about the Underdog is, you can draft them. You can draft them now, and you can draft them later. It'll always be there, but you can't build the same. Like you can, build different rosters now because you don't know who's going to be in the playoffs. So you can technically build a super team, so to speak. So, but that'll obviously change once we know who's kind of locked in.
I think the biggest reason why I want to win one of these fairly big tournaments is that I can play more of this different stuff. I wish I could play in more of it and have all the, different one day to build all those teams over there. And then the different formats and so many, price points and everything like that, single entry and not DFS. It's just overwhelming. And hardly any of us can afford to do even more than half of it maybe, but it's so much fun to think about. Let's move to running back, Darren, with main event advance rates and percentage of teams that each player is on. Raheem Mostert and Alvin Kamara are the top two names there. Both make, I think, easy sense. I look down, I have a Bijan team, and what a cluster of players there are in that 4 to 5% range in Bijan Robinson, who I think is pretty well situated here, good schedule, escalating workload. Saquon Barkley, where maybe the Giants are actually live, and he had a good Monday night game. Austin Eckler, I don't know. The Herbert injury doesn't help, but he was not having a prolific year. Still some value in Eckler. Najee Harris even is in there. Some interesting players that I think if you made a main event sprint, you're looking to see if you have somebody in that kind of range, or of course lower, that you could actually justify starting here. And these are guys, especially starting with Robinson, who you definitely want to start.
Yeah. Also, James Conner and Aaron Jones are really low owned, but so it's either going to be one of those guys. Jerick McKinnon, he did it last year. Maybe he does it again. You don't know. And then there's always the wild part if an injury happens and you happen to have, because we're going to stockpile running backs regardless. So there's a whole slew of, those backups that are sitting out there. Is like Chris Rodriguez, like he's sort of low owned. Like I assume Brian Robinson's coming back this week. I'm not totally sure. But there's plenty of guys like that. But yeah, so anybody 5% or lower is really going to be like that magic dart that could thrust you, because you need if you're we didn't talk about this yet. So when the sprint starts, everybody's seeded from 1 to 830 in the main event. So the question becomes, how do I ascend up to the top, right? And I think last year, Go Bills guys, they kind of walked me through like how they pulled it off. They started, I think, at 148 out of 800 or whatever, and they admittedly used tools on my site to identify that, to get leverage over the field. Who's the Jets running back
they used McKinnon and Zay Jones in week 15 as sort of contrarian plays, and each scored 3 touchdowns that week.
Yeah. And so they just leapt over the field because they knew everybody was going to start that Jets running back. Somebody with the Z.
Oh, yeah.
Zonovan Knight.
Zonovan Knight. Yeah.
And they saw that and they're like, well, we got to take it. Now that could blow up in your face, but for them, it worked immensely. And then they just rode into the sunset from there, essentially. But that's what you have to do. And I was a little excited today because it's like, oh wow, I got the Kelsey Mahomes stack, and there's only like 20 of them. That's great. And then I went to my Stack Explorer and I saw Kelsey Mahomes, but I'm like the 18th guy, overall on the leaderboard that has Kelsey Mahomes. Like, how am I going to get ahead of all these other guys who have Kelsey Mahomes? Like, I'm going to have to pull some really risky moves to try and get above them. But it's having that awareness of what you're dealing with against the rest of the field to ascend. It's the next layer of strategy, of doing this. It's not just, okay, what guys do I start? It's like, well, what guys do you need to start based upon the whole macro, thing that's going on in the leaderboard. And every week it's going to change. So what we'll do with that Explore is the players will stay the same, like the ownerships and the combinations will stay the same. But then we go in and then we update the ranks. So now you could see yourself kind of going up the board, amongst the other teams that have similar players or not. So it's really, it's something it's pretty, and they laid it out, it's very useful in that way.
Yeah, no, it's the game within the game. And it's almost like a DFS kind of thing moving forward here. It's almost, like a playoff challenge type of thing, which is really fun and really cool. It's nice if you can get multiple teams to this point, so you can kind of maybe play them off of each other. And that worked really well for them. And like you said, looking ahead to see the teams ahead of you. Like I came in, again, thanks to your tools, I came in 10th place in the playoff challenge last year overall. And at one point I'm like, when I was in 10th, I'm like, it's on Super Bowl. Do I go look ahead and see how many of these teams have I think it was Hurts and Kelsey, and I'm like, I don't even want to look to find. And of course, all 9 teams ahead of me had Hurts and Kelsey, so it's like, all right, well, I can't fish any higher than 10th. Fine, great, but like that matters, right? Like those teams in front of you and all that type of stuff. So yeah, using the tools, the Stack Explorers is going to be interesting, and like finding the player this season, that's going to be you talk about injuries. Maybe you can get some leverage there. I'm looking at like Rashad Penny here at like 1.5%. Like that's got to be all Mike's teams, right? I think all 13 of these teams are Mike's teams here. But yeah, you got the Rashad Pennies, Eckler for like you said, Mike, the 4 to 5% range. Like what if Eckler gets hot or something like that? So, and I will say I'm a little surprised that Raheem Mostert, although he's like maybe the second most owned player in the whole tournament, second or third, I'm surprised he's not higher than 16%. I mean, we're talking about like an 11th round pick who has like 20 touchdowns. Like, and he plays every week. It's not like it's 4 touchdowns one week. And like he limped through last night's game. First play, gets hurt. I'm like, oh, here we go. Like they're helping him up after every play. Like he powers through it, gets 2 more touchdowns. I'm shocked that he's not more owned, to be honest with you.
Well, and it started week 1 too. It did not
immediately.
There were not early cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the maximum number you could have in terms of ownership is 40%. Because 2 teams from every league will get in there, and then occasionally you get the third team if you were, you didn't get it automatically, but you got it through when you play. So 40 is like the high water mark.
Okay. That makes more sense. So
it's funny. Keenan Allen is actually like the top guy overall, and that might just blow up in their face. It's sad. Chargers.
Yeah.
By the way, earlier in the show, I'm like, wonder how I didn't do better this year. And then Adam reminds me, I've got 7 trillion Rashad Penny teams, and we're still holding on hope to that. We're just holding on to the tow rope, just barely. One hand is off. I'm kicking the water off, and my head is completely underwater.
But we're still alive. They signed him. It's like, this is the guy, and then they kept signing other people, and then Penny just became like an after.
I have a friend who reports on the Eagles, and I asked about this maybe by like week 3. Like, remember it was like the Thursday night game after it was Swift didn't play, Gainwell got the lion's share. Your Eagles, Darren. And okay, well, here we go. This is the night against Minnesota. Maybe this is the night where it's Penny, and he did not even play at all. And the guy I know is like, well, they're just going to save him. And so that's what I would say too. If I worked for the Eagles and I had him on anybody on the team, I'm just saving him for later. Swift is not doing much either, though. Like if they ever wanted to change, they could. They need a jolt.
Yeah, the offense is sputtering over there. So
I feel like, again, Bijan Robinson is super exciting at 5%.
Because so
different.
many teams he sank a lot of teams because he's just recently sort of started to produce, so that's why he's so lowly represented in the overall pool. So that could be the thing if he snuck through there. With same thing with Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is 3.97% owned.
Yeah.
Assuming he plays, I feel bad he took that shot again, but I mean, he could certainly explode.
Yeah, it's if you got through with Jefferson, it's even better now because how many teams didn't get through because they started him and he barely played and didn't score any points. It was almost even better for the teams that got through with him. I have a fantasy
Mongoose got through.
Mongoose guy got through, and he started him. But speaking of Bijan, second best strength of schedule here. Rest away, Carolina, Indy, Chicago, with that 4%, Mike. That's it's exciting. Eckler number 1, by the way. So it's going to be interesting down the stretch.
And the knee-jerk reaction is the Herbert goes away, that's bad, but it wasn't really happening for Eckler either. And now you might want to lean on him a little bit, or that could mean Joshua Kelly. I don't know. So you got to take your chances there. At wide receiver, similarly, you mentioned Jefferson just under 4%, another injury concern there, but look at some of the names between 4.5% and 5% ownership in the main event. Drake London, Cooper Kupp, that's one for Louie and me. Whether to, maybe we can get a couple more games like last week out of Kupp. Christian Watson, if he comes back, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, all in this range where, these are guys you're going to want to start, and it's 100% you do it because you have a little bit of this contrarian advantage in your favor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys are all owned. Puka Nacua is up there. That's weird that Nacua is 13%, but then Kupp is 5%. But I guess Nacua, he exploded at the beginning of the year, so he carried all his teams. But Keenan Allen is the number 1 receiver. So that's unfortunate for the Chargers, unless Easton Stick turns in it. But nobody has. It was weird. I saw a lot of backup quarterbacks rostered because I guess for a lack of a quality alternative for a lot of the teams that wanted a second quarterback, what they ended up doing was like there's some Marcus Mariota team. So if you're a Hurts owner and you're like, okay, well, there's nothing really viable out there as a starter, I'm just going to grab Marcus Mariota and protect myself that way. Nobody protected themselves with Easton Stick, none of the Herbert owners said that was really weird. So, but now they're just SOL for the most part. That's unfortunate for them.
We both got some memorabilia rocking. I've got an Easton stick down here somewhere. From growing up from my hockey.
That's right.
Hockey days. Is that an Easton stick behind you there, by the way?
I got
Darren?
a Bauer and a CCM. That's not an Easton.
Oh,
okay. So close. So close.
so close. Yeah, and that 5% range for receivers is Zay Jones. League winner Zay Jones made it in at 5% again. Yeah, it's super interesting to try to figure out, like, I think Cooper Kupp too might be maybe those teams that got through the teams that got him in that little, not that sweet spot's probably the wrong term, but where they were able to get him in the 5th, 6th, 7th round kind of at the end of August. And maybe it didn't. I was kind of comparing him to Jonathan Taylor. JT's kind of the same thing. He gets through at 6%. Those are probably teams that got him later on, although the main event team I got through was a JT in the 2nd round back in it was a July 4th slow draft, like opening weekend of the drafts. And we snuck a team through with JT in the 2nd round. So there's different ways to get these guys through, but like you said, it's hitting the right. Even a guy like Deebo Samuel at 8%, he's like wide receiver 20. Like you think he would much higher. The guy's been smashing the last pretty much all season when he's been healthy, and even especially the last month, he's been unbelievable.
I'm sorry. Did you happen to mention a scenario at a draft in the sweet spot where Deebo Samuel might have been good value and Jonathan Taylor? My producer is telling. Are you getting this? I believe there's a screen share available to you if you would.
That's right. Oh, I see it.
There might be an example. Oh, there it is.
Oh, there it is.
Team 11. Team 11 is in the sprint and was a league winner, first seed, and then won our playoff games. Really fun year for Louis G and me.
There you go.
I mean, look at it.
Deebo, Kupp, there they are. All of JT. Oh my God, it's a poster child here. Mostert
and Achane.
Oh boy.
Ferguson all year. Ferguson. I mean, feel free to shriek and holler.
That's a team.
There's Prescott. And there at the end, Louis asked me Atwell or Puka, and I said Atwell. 2nd round pick, 2nd-year player. Oh, listen to the groans. Can you come on in the chat? They're booing the Poppy Grandes.
He had a couple usable weeks, Atwell, and then not that he would start. You know who's killing us? Gabe Davis is poison. I one league I started him all 3 weeks that he got to 0, and then I sat him 2 of the 3 weeks where he went off. So he's a guy he's just, it's like impossible to start him with any sort of with confidence. But I don't know what's going on with.
We can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. And Diggs has quieted. Kansas City was the perfect matchup for Davis, not just because he had that huge game there, but because Snead takes away the number 1 guy. A lot of number 2 receivers have done really well against the Chiefs. That's part of the reason I started Davis over Brandon Ayuk in that ill-fated FPC game. They're shaking their head. They're not groaning this time, but they should be. This time it's deserved. 0-0-0.
I'm shaking my head because I thought I was so cool starting Gabe Davis over Garrett Wilson in a 3K, and I got away with it. But man, I even consulted the best fantasy minds in the business about this, and it was everyone, and I agree. Like, it doesn't make any sense. The Garrett Wilson thing. Listen, the Garrett Wilson thing. Pouring rain. One of the worst quarterbacks you've ever seen in your life. Good defense, and the guy goes for 19 points. But hey, it's good news. Good news going forward here.
Darren, anybody else on your mind that you're excited to have or curious about, whether that's because of the data or just your own teams?
The whole, I'm still like enamored with the whole Kelsey Mahomes thing, that he's so low owned, and partially because obviously
you got
an interest in that. But if there's other long shots out there, Kyler Murray, I'm interested to see what they will do. Although they've got a tough run with San Francisco, at Chicago, and at Philly. Jared Goff seems to have a nice schedule with Denver, Minnesota, and Dallas. Purdy, Lawrence. Like, there's a lot of stacks out there that, that aren't coming to our top of mind, but I think are going to be the ones that really sort of at the end of the day explode. Now, going back to Jake Browning, there's only 9 Jake Browning, Jamar Chase teams. So that's super low. And then T. Higgins, I mean, he's been relatively disappointing. But there's only 5 of those.
Right.
And Tua Lamar stacks or I'm sorry, Tua and Tyreek and Waddle stacks are pretty low too, considering like the perception of what they should be doing.
What about Jackson?
Lamar Jackson is the 14th most owned quarterback. And at the highest stack with him is Zay Flowers. But then after that, they're very low owned guys. So it's one of those.
What I want to know is how the hell is Mark Andrews at 9 teams here in this thing? Like no one found anyone good to pick up and drop Mark Andrews.
I saw that too. Like what
somebody said a thing about how maybe he'll come back before it's over, but I mean probably not before the playoffs. Not
in the next 3 weeks.
There's a Joe Burrow team out there. I mean, I don't know what. Sometimes people get left on your roster because you fail at the waivers. Like you get outbid, and then
that is true.
Guy's still on your roster, and maybe something happened like that, and they ran out of fab. I don't know.
They ran out of fab. Yeah, that is.
It's true. Thousands of teams. Maybe somebody was convicted of murder and ended up having no Wi-Fi access and had to leave their teams alone. I mean, or worse.
That is true.
So there's going to be some of that. Sad to say.
I would rather hear that happened than someone purposefully left them on their team. Okay, like that's disgusting.
In the fantasy pros, you do see examples of teams that you're losing to that have dead weight. Even in the main, one of the teams on that board I showed you, we played them in the playoffs, and he had $985 of fab left. I mean, $2,000 isn't what it used to be. I'm sorry, $21.25. That was a live draft. Isn't what it used to be.
There's really not a lot of correlation between money spent and savvy of owners anymore. Like some guys will just throw cash out there, and I mean, you see it a lot in the fantasy pros. Like there's so many abandoned teams, and people just give up. But that'll happen as you expand the field. That just attracts more newbies. Like if you want to have a good laugh, like just you go to the FFPC lobby chat. I usually hop in there once a day, and the questions that you get in there are why can't I pick up another quarterback, or why can't I make any more waivers? I don't have any fab left. Like they don't even understand that once you get 0 fab, like you can't make roster moves anymore. It's just like there's really basic knowledge that is lacking for a lot of people. But you learn the hard way, right? I mean, we take it for granted, but sometimes you got to live it.
That's what pisses me off about not doing better. Is that particular tournament there was overlay. Adam and I talked all summer like this tournament is not going to fill. They raised the prize pool, right? Like I thought. 350 with underdog and everything. That fantasy pros is the soft spot, and I'm not sure. I can't prove it wasn't. What you're saying says there's some merit to that, but I didn't have enough success in there. It just it was frustrating.
From what I can tell, they're going to start those drafts in February next year. Like if you go to the lobby, like and you hit the fantasy pros tournament, you can sign up for drafts in February at the end of February.
Well, I'm free.
It's terrible news.
I'm free.
We're heard all day. Oh no!
It's going to.
Well, maybe that's the adjustment. Perhaps they're going to make to that tournament, which didn't fill. Is just started earlier and give themselves better odds.
Maybe spread it out more. But it's you know how it is. It's the first months of the draft. It's the same guys beating each other over the head in those draft rooms.
Yeah.
But maybe they have a plan. They're well thought out, and maybe they do the old marketing blitz, and you get just degenerates because the whole industry is now drafting earlier.
Right.
It used to be we waited till July, but now everybody goes all year round.
Reason to think that they might want to get in the space a little earlier than they had. That was a Memorial Day, or right after the NFL draft actually. I mean, one of the teams I have through, we drafted on April 30th. So I know it starts at least that early, but apparently maybe next year earlier still. Darren, such a treat to have you on. So much good information. Best of luck to you in these playoff weeks. And hopefully next year, if we end up in the same city randomly, we spend more than 5 minutes together.
Sounds good. Hey guys, good luck in the sprint. Anybody watching, if you already spent $2,000 on a team and you're in the sprint, I recommend you invest in sort of the advanced metrics that we have at the site. Like we don't really solicit people to describe, but there's 2 times you want to be knowledgeable. It's during draft season and now. Like you're going to want to see the whole tournament pool of players and where they're ranked, like being able to go in there. And if you're that savvy of a player, take advantage of it, because the data is out there. So
agreed. 100%.
All right.
Thank you, Darren.
Playoff challenge time then.
Yeah. Playoff challenge. So. Right. For sure.
For Darren Armani, Mike Shope, Adam Krautwurst at DeepEndFF1, Twitter or Spotify or iTunes or Apple Music or or anything. These days you got to be everywhere. So we're trying for that. Thanks for being with us tonight. Good luck in week 15. See you next week.
See you guys.
See you guys.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.